33, so we can get this moving. Just want to make sure we're recording. Awesome, wonderful. Good evening, everyone. This is the Finance and Revenue Committee meeting on April 12th, 2023. Myself, Nick Allen, Bernie Flynn, and Brian McGinnis. We're going to call the meeting to order a few minutes late at 6:33. Item number 2 is comments, suggestions, petitions by residents in attendance regarding items not on the agenda. Okay, seeing none, we will.
I would like to.
Oh, yeah.
I want to see Mr. Metrick to add in item number F under action items, number 4, 4F, and that would give permission to Ms. Leonti and yourself to explore moving the reserve fund into a money market fund, and then amend the agenda. So if I could get a second on that.
Second.
Thank you. And then add item G under action items, and that would be a discussion for RFP for insurance, health insurance and insurance in general, put RFPs out for insurance.
If he needs a second, I second it.
You'll have to agree to, as a committee, to amend the agenda. And it sounds like there's 2 who are in favor of amending the agenda, so it's amended.
Thank you.
All right, any other items not on the agenda this evening? Yes, come on up. Mr. Edwards. No.
Planning on bringing this up during other business, but the purchasing for the spring tree planting. But since you're amending the agenda, wherever you'd like that.
I'm not sure if that's on. Is that on? Microphone?
Good.
Thank you. If you could just speak into it louder for the audience.
Sure. Do you want me to restate that or?
Sure.
Okay. I emailed earlier today regarding the spring tree planting. We have a contract for a contractor to plant trees, but we never came here to get permission to spend the money for about 100 new trees. So wherever you'd like that on the agenda.
Sure. Can we make that item H under action items? We're okay with that? We'll do
Yeah, I guess we're gonna have to amend that, put it as H.
Second.
Sure. All right, sounds good. We're busy tonight. Cool, thank you. This is the longest I've ever spent on item 2.
Never second.
Anything else? Just making sure. All right, 3A is our March 2023 financials.
Good evening. I'm starting with page 1 of the report, the March 2023 cash balances. We started the month with $16,405,191 in cash. We brought in $4,648,607. We spent $5,463,713. This left us with an ending cash balance across all funds of $15,590,085. And of this amount, $1,405,751 is for general fund operations. Moving over to page 2, the budget to actual summary by department for the year ended 3/31/2023. We had actual revenues of $8,752,532. This is offset by actual expense of $9,064,171. This leaves us with a net loss for the year ended of $311,639 across all funds. It is also important to note that the general fund is operating at a loss of $1,703,659. Both parking and sewer are operating in a positive position. Looking at the rest of the report for the year ended March 31st, we do expect most budget line items to have about 75% of their budget remaining at this point in time. Looking at the general fund, looking at the revenues, we did receive our first big payment on real estate taxes. We booked $785,000 that was received from the county for those collections. Both EIT and LST are performing well. We've booked about $1.5 million in EIT and $183,000 in local services. One big thing I'd like to point out, and kudos to the team, we finally received our payment from FEMA for the storm damage back in September of 2021, the Ida storm. We incurred $186,000 in expenses that were paid to Duraco for storm sewer repair. So we were able to collect that and, finally get that payment. Looking on the expense side of the general fund, both police and public works overtime are meeting expectations. We also made our first quarterly police pension MMO paydown. I'm a firm believer in attacking this liability by quarter. I think it benefits the fund and does better than paying it off at year end. So we made a $600,000 payment towards that liability. That money came directly from the EIT pension that is a separated cash account. And at this point in time, we still have $1.3 million left on the police MMO. Moving over to the fire fund, we are expecting to receive our first batch of payments from the townships. We haven't received all payments at this point in time, so we do expect to book those in April. Both utilities and equipment repairs are still trending high. They've been continuing to trend high in last year and also into this year. Both of these line items are operating, they have less than 50% remaining in those line items at this point in time. Moving over to the sewer, monthly sewer revenues are meeting expectations. On the expense side, we are seeing the overtime creep up. Both plants are not operating at full capacity with staffing are continuing to meet that demand. We are also seeing both fuel and heating oil are trending higher than budget expectations at this point in time. Moving over to parking, both income and expenses are overall operating well. There's just two line items that, are a little bit higher than what we would hope at this point in time. That being ticket income, which is at 82%, and district court fines are at 88%. While not, terribly high, I think that will recover, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Liquid fuels, we will not be, there will be no major expenditures until we receive our annual allocation. We do expect to receive that in April. And then finally, stream protection. We have about 25% of the budget remaining for revenues to be collected, and there were no major expenses reported in March. Are there any questions?
I don't have
No.
any public questions or comments. All right, hopefully wastewater becomes fully staffed like your department finally is, which is exciting. Thank you. I think we're good then to move on to 3B, which is our capital program reconciliation for 2023.
So we had three major projects that were in the 2022 budget. They were not completed by year end, and we thought that they would be. Typically, what's part of our budget process is if we don't have projects that will be completed by year end, we reserve a cash reserve line item in the budget for these projects. Since that was not completed, we're asking the committee for the authority to spend what is needed for these three projects and put them into the 2023 budget using our year-end cash. Jeff, if you could move over to the second page, please. You'll see here that in both the general fund and the wastewater fund, we ended the year with about $2.8 million in cash. The projects that are on the prior page, the total of those three projects totals about $1.2 million. One of those is a reimbursable grant, so we will get the money back for that, but we do have to expend those expenses upfront. Will speak to any questions that anyone may have on any of these projects.
And just in terms of procedure, this is, if I'm remembering correctly, this is how we've always done this, correct? This isn't a new policy?
No, it's because when we were doing the budget, we thought that these things were going to be completed by year end, and as required, these we can't roll them over into the next year without allocating at least a cash reserve for that. And since that wasn't done, I think it's proper protocol to come before the committee and ask that we can use the year end money that was left over at year end to fund these projects if you wish to do that. So,
Okay, so yeah, we were budgeted for these last year,
yes.
and then we're moving it to this.
Yeah, and they weren't completed by year end and they weren't included in the budget for 2023.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or concerns?
Just a comment too. It's not uncommon to have multi-year projects in your capital program and plan. And we're doing a better job now of anticipating how much money we're going to need for things that don't get done. It's just sometimes a few things unexpected happen. And that's why this request is being made, and we're being transparent about what dollars are going to be spent in 2023 for things that we thought were going to get done in 2022. And we're checking to make sure there's enough money in the piggy bank to pay for it.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, sounds good. Thank you for that update. So I think we're good then for 3C, which is our ARPA program update.
This is a reading and eye exam. No. So what we've done is we've created one source document where everyone can, in the office at least, can go and understand what has Borough Council appropriated out of the American Rescue Plan Acts. What kinds of projects are they? When was the appropriation date? Are they finished or are they in process? So this is better viewed probably on your own screens. And then as invoices are paid against these projects, we will start debiting that appropriation amount. And when the projects are complete and there's money left over, it can be swept into a pool of funds that council can reappropriate to other projects down the road. So this is how we're managing this going forward. We are going to make this list data heavy and more descriptive. I'd like to see this published on our website, where we have a short short project description about what we're doing with these 31 projects and where we are status-wise with those projects. I believe there is a graph, I think, on one of these sheets that maybe we could just dwell on a little bit. Page 3. This really helps. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. This includes the latest ARPA allocation, which we're requesting for the roof in our action items this evening, because we didn't clarify that when we approved the bid last month. That's a big number, about $600,000 or so. So as of right now, the Westchester Borough has appropriated nearly the entire ARPA allocation. You can see those two top line items. But we've only spent about 15% of it so far. So we're in the phase where we need to get these projects done so that council's in a position to appropriate the remaining funding before the end of 2024. And it's also an important phase to remember, to be very mindful of costs. Council has asked that the staff follow through on 31 projects. If we're going to get them all done, we got to get them all done at or under budget. If we get over budget in any meaningful way in any of them, or more than one of them, we could go over budget. So we're in the game now. We are managing these projects, and hopefully we'll have enough balance remaining to allocate there that we can make some more decisions between now and the end of 2024. And just a quick breakdown, those projects break out into roughly those 5 categories we've illustrated. The buildings and energy project is largely taken up by the roof, that number of $671,000. There was another appropriation council made to upgrade the HVAC system in this building, which yielded lots of very positive results last summer. Thank you for doing that. Streets and stormwater make up a large portion of that, as does parks and open space, and then the smaller allocations are to technology and public safety. So this is just a record of what we have decided as a council and a staff together and where we are at as of today. And we're going to be reporting on this. I would believe a good cadence would be to get back to you quarterly to report where we've been, how much money has been spent, so that when we go into next budget season, which will start soon enough, we will know what is available or remaining in this fund to be able to appropriate.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments about all of that information? I have none. Any public comments or questions tonight? Great, thank you for the in-detail update on that. Item 3D is our budget and purchasing policy.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to sit up here because the microphone works a lot better than that microphone on a given basis. What I've been able to do with the help of Mr. Mann is put together 2 slides to try to explain very simply the budget process and the purchasing policy. It's amazing. I went off my script already. Tonight, I'm going to give a very basic description to what the budget and what does our borough use as a method. We are mandated by law to exercise, to do this exercise, to ensure transparency and accountability. We must prepare and present our budget annually and must set out goals to show the revenue and expenditures of the budget to the borough. Jeff, you want to put this first slide up for me? That's not me. If it was, I don't know those words. Anyway, as he's putting it up, the income and expenses for the coming year, we actually have 2 buckets. We have an operating bucket and we have a capital bucket. As Mr. Metrick just mentioned, the operating bucket does the day-to-day operations of the borough. And the capital bucket does the expenditures for infrastructure. Although the operating budget expires at the end of every year, the capital budget can extend 2 or 3 years based on what projects we actually have in our pipeline. The finance director creates the annual budget with the input from department heads and managers and reports the budget to the borough manager. The budget must be fully approved by borough council before the end of the year. And there are 3 reporting chances that people can adjust the budget. The preliminary budget, the budget, and then the final budget. And during those times, residents can always bring input to the borough so we know that they understand what we're spending our money to. What are the controls on the budget? It requires transparency, accountability, and effective financial management. And that's what Barb tries to do every month in front of the microphone so everyone can hear. Council adopts the budget and the municipal officials implement it. The budget must be realistic and credible. We can't say, we know that we're going to bring in $30 million and we say the budget's $60 million. So it has to be realistic and credible. To ensure this, the budget must compare the previous year's budget, actual income and expenditures, and use historical data to help calculate the new budget for the next year coming up. The municipalities cannot spend more unless it's allocated in the budget. The items in the budget are place mark. This is probably one of the most important things that I have to get across to whoever's listening and pays attention. Jeff, put the next slide up, please. The items in the budget are place marks for anticipated expenditures. It doesn't always mean that the budgeted item is readily available because of a few factors. Jeff, you want to blow that up a little bit? The factors can be the director's spending limit. Every department has a spending limit that they're allowed to use. Probably most of the directors have up to $4,000 that they're allowed to use without seeking further permission to spend money. Cash flow in the treasury. In January, for all intents and purposes, we're broke because we have very little cash flow to carry over from December into January. The last couple of years, we had to borrow from ourselves to fund salaries, benefits, and health to get us through the first quarter. Barb reported tonight that the first quarter, we got our first hit on property tax. Now we can start digging ourselves out of the hole, from the winter time. Borough Council has adopted in our administrative code a purchasing policy. It's in the administrative code, and all members of the borough employment must adhere to this borough purchasing policy. It was revised in 2020 because it really wasn't clear enough. Today, it spells out precisely every duties and limits that each department can spend. For an example, the borough manager, his limit prior to coming to council in the administrative code is $4,000. If he needs to spend something more than that, he has to come to borough council, present a reason why he wants to spend more than $4,000, and borough council make the decision whether to allow it to happen. The purchasing policy is actually a guardrail. It's to ensure that all departments and directors and borough managers know their levels of approval. We should refresh this topic every January when we start a new council year. Because people change during the year and people really don't know what their responsibilities are. To give you a small example, recently there were 2 police cars purchased, and they had to go through the purchasing policy. We're going to talk about that later in this evening. For example, the police department purchased a police vehicle without getting approval prior to doing it. Same thing with Public Works and the fleet manager. You have to follow the purchasing policy. If it's over $10,000, you have to come before council and ask if you can spend the $10,000 and give council a good reason why you're spending the money. The money can be in the budget. The budget's what's in the budget is a placeholder. So like Mr. Edwards just did, we agreed to have the tree guy come put the trees in, but we forgot to ask Borough Council if they could spend over $10,000. The last item that I really want to stress, just because it's in the budget doesn't mean you can spend it, okay? And I put that on there, I think, twice. The borough manager, underneath the Chapter 16 of the Borough Code, subtitle number 14, and I'll paraphrase. The borough manager is the chief purchasing officer in the borough. If anyone needs to spend more than $4,000 it starts with him first. And then if he approves the request, a full written report has to be provided and presented to council, whoever's requested it. If the borough manager says, the borough manager is responsible for the budget and responsible to the members, the 20,000 people that live in this town. And I don't want anybody to think that his job is less important than that. He's the most important person in the administration to make sure that we have safeguards for our budgeting process. If any department needs a copy of the updated purchasing policy, we'll make sure that you get it. And the reason why it was updated was because a couple of years ago, we had a member of Public Works spend $800,000 without permission. And to tell you that that was the most uncomfortable summer, that actually was the fall, because he did not give us the bills until Thanksgiving. So Borough Council had the purchasing policy rewritten, so it's very plainly written that everyone can understand. I've talked to Mr. Metric, and he agrees that if somebody has a problem with the purchasing, they're to go to him first to make sure. And the last line I haven't read, the transparency is our responsibility. There's a reason why we make sure that things are out in the open, because we don't want anybody to know that, suppose that there are backroom deals going on in the borough. So that's my report. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any comments or questions about that item? Yes, Ms. LeBold, you can come on up.
Thank you. Not on. Is it on? No. Thank you. Put it on silent. Okay. No, yes, no, yes? Yes? On? Oh, thank you. All right, thank you. I just wanted to make a small correction to something that Mr. Flynn said.
I can take constructive criticism most days.
Okay, I'm reading the administrative purchasing system in the administrative code. It's section 325. And section 325A1, $10,000 is established as the limitation when competitive bidding shall be required for purchases. So it's not like, it's not where somebody has to come and ask if they can spend $10,000. It's required that if they're going to try to spend more than, if they need to spend more than $10,000, then they have to go to competitive bidding. So I just wanted to correct that.
Under the new written rule, Mr. LeBold, purchases or contracts of $10,000 or more, just like you mentioned, any expenditure for goods and services, the cost of which is $10,000 or more within one fiscal or calendar year shall be made by the department director only after the approval of Borough Council has first been secured. So they made those your words a lot easier to understand. In page 2 of the purchasing policy that was rewritten in 2020.
Okay, I'm reading out of the code.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
it's different. I mean, it's approximately the same, but this basically said that it's the borough manager who needs to do the competitive bidding, not department heads. That's my understanding from the administrative code.
I misspoke on that, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure that we're both on the same page on that. Okay, it also says in C that the authorization to bid goods or services that are included in the operating budget that's adopted by borough shall constitute authorization for the borough manager to initiate competitive bidding for such purchases. So that's how it works. More than $10,000, then that requires the borough manager to get competitive bids. Am I understanding that correctly, Mr. Metric?
You are correct.
That's what it says in the code. And then when it's determined that a purchase is to be made through competitive bidding, then you go through the usual process. And that's what it comes down to. But, and so ultimately what happens is that it has to come to Borough Council eventually, because for the award of bid to be made, that has to be approved by Borough Council. That's the short version of what I'm looking at. So it's section 3 of the administrative code.
Yeah, that's all prior to going out to a vendor and placing an order. You have to go do the due diligence first, then get a PO number from the Treasury Department or Finance Department, and then go to the vendor and say, I have a PO and this is what I want, if it's over $10,000.
Yeah, but you have to have competitive bidding.
Yeah, competitive bids are.
Right.
Yeah,
So when the bid is awarded, then you do the PO, right?
exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
We're on
That's
the
what I
same
thought.
page. Thank you.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure we were all talking the same language. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. LeBold.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah, sure. Chief Moorhead.
Jim Moorhead, Chief of Police. This creates a huge inefficiency for the police department. I've been here for over 34 and a half years. We've always operated fiscally responsible. In my last 3+ years as chief, I've made sure that we have been fiscally responsible. Barb notifies all department heads at the beginning of the year after a budget is approved and tells us to halt major spending until after the first quarter, which, if I'm not mistaken, we always do. Once Barb gives us the green light, right around now, then we begin our purchasing process based on the 4 corners of the budget, which is approved by full council. I came to council beginning in August of last year with a budget. It was discussed, it was approved. And that spending policy that we talk about, that was instituted in 2019, was not meant for what's contained inside of the 4 corners of the budget. It was meant for having an incident that happened with Public Works not occur again, which was spending outside of those 4 corners. I agree with that, and I honor that. If this is the new way, we need to know, and I think we're being let known that this is the way we're going to do it. This creates problems, public safety problems. We have 2 brand new cars in receipt. They are sitting out at our vendor, and they're sitting in a parking lot because A, they haven't been paid for, and B, they need to be upfitted, and that's an expenditure as well. So now I'm going to have to come back to council again to seek approval for these funds. That's fine. It's just going to take more work away from all the department heads to do the work that's already been done leading into the budget cycle. Along with that, we do follow and go through a stringent purchase order policy procedure with Mr. Metric and Barb. And we seek those approvals. And sometimes they do sit and they wait 30 days, 45 days. And that's done for reasons that are beyond me. That's Barb taking care of books and making sure that it's okay to spend that money. I think the way that we've done it in the past is responsible. I think it goes in accordance with the borough's budget. And I just kind of wanted to speak on that because it causes a huge inefficiency for the police department. We spend over $10,000 every week. So it's just going to become a hardship for us. Thank you.
And something I'm a little confused about as well. When, like, every month we get the financials and we have at the bottom of that document just a list of all the checks we wrote. Many of those items exceed $10,000, and I don't recall specifically talking about each and every one of those items at a monthly meeting. And in my mind, it was budgeted for, and that's why we had the authorization to spend that money. So how does that reconcile with our
Barb,
policy?
I can explain it or Barb can explain it.
All right.
I'm
Good.
going to answer your question. I have good news for you.
So generally, a lot of those large items that you will see on the check registers each month, generally there's contracts that would have already been approved by Borough Council that would be in place. So that would give us the authority to be able to pay those expenditures without coming forward to you, each month. I think one of the confusions, in my opinion, with the purchasing policy, the police vehicles we had budgeted for when we did the 2023 budget. I think, in my opinion, I think that we could have done a better summarization so that council was fully aware that those were part of the capital project process. I know that each department head did their own presentations at the committee, but in my opinion, I think that us as administration should do a better job of making sure that council was fully aware that that was going to be what our procedure was moving forward. With that being said, the vehicles that were recently purchased, they were not purchased through a contract. So that's why the piece on page 2 applies, because those purchases are over $10,000, to Mr. Flynn's point.
So to try to keep splitting this hair, because I do remember discussing these police cars during the budget process. So I guess in my mind, are we trying to establish that creating that budget is not authorization? Is that, and we would need a separate authorization after the fact?
So again, as Mr. Flynn had pointed out, when we do a budget, we are, expecting a certain amount of revenues to come in, and based on those revenues, we are allocating certain expenses. Now, yes, these vehicles, they were budgeted for, but you still have to follow the proper protocol of making sure that, if an item is $2,500, that you're obtaining a PO. If it's between $4,000 and $10,000, that you're getting 3 quotes, because we need to make sure that we're getting, the best possible price for our money. Now, I know a lot of times that doesn't happen because in our line of work, we have very specific items that only certain companies can do. There's only so many companies that produce sewer equipment or certain parts that go to make that infrastructure work. I think the issue with this is because a contract was not in place to purchase these cars. Yes, I'm aware they were in the budget, but according to the policy that we have, we've had in place, and it was, amended back in 2020, it should have been asked for approval, even though it was already in the budget. I don't think that's a necessary, authorization that you can go ahead and spend it. I just think, to be fully transparent, we should become before council for any of those items.
And then Chief Moorhead, if you could just help us understand, how is this changing your operations, especially in light of the fact that this has been in place since 2020?
There's not a department head that's followed that policy since 2019 because we operate within the 4 corners of the budget, which is already approved by council. That's how we've run business. If we're going to change that and we're going to operate this way after tonight, then I just need to know that, and we'll make that work. What it does is it duplicates efforts. I come to you in August, September, October, explain why we need items. Sometimes we don't get those items, but the items we get approved for, to me, I've established why we need those items. The purchasing of police vehicles, we follow CoStars. So we're following the purchasing process, again, being responsible. So it drags me down right now, but moving forward, is it going to drag us down? I think yes. We're not allowed to spend until March, April sometimes. And now I'm going to have to come to April financial, maybe even May financial, and ask for the release of funds or approval on items. And if there's questions that have to go back, now we're mid-year without items that we requested the following year.
And maybe you can help me like a little more in detail with the mechanics of this, because I totally see and understand your point. Like, I remember talking about those cars very clearly, and I remember deciding that this made sense to do, and we budgeted for it. And And it sounds like we have an entire quarter of inaction based on our cash flow situation.
We do.
Is there any reason that we can't use that time to get this authorization done? Or does that money need to be in our account first to then start taking those steps?
To answer your question, we can do it that way. It does get sticky because most quotes are only good for 30 days. So the quotes are going to have to be revisited. Sometimes vendors raise their prices. It can happen, but we're talking small amounts.
So it sounds like we can get all of that administrative work and all of the purchase ordering, numbering, and all the clerical stuff can be done in that first quarter.
Yes.
Because we've already, I guess, made those policy choices as council. And it sounds like it's just, we need to rubber stamp some more things in that first quarter.
You can. Yep, we can.
So I don't want anyone, if I may, I don't want anyone listening to this conversation thinking that absent council's approval of large expenditures, that there's no controls going on, right? Anytime we have to spend more than $2,500, we have to generate a purchase order, and that's a permission to pay the bill. If the amount is over $4,000, we need 3 telephonic bids or email bids. And if it's over $10,000, which is half of the state's minimum requirement, that's how stringent the borough's purchasing policy is. We have to go through a public bid process, and you can, in lieu of going through public bid, use a state cooperative purchasing program. And there are certain exclusions from things that need to be bid, like unique professional services, or you're looking for something and it's a unicorn part and only one person makes it. But I just want people listening and council, and I like this dialogue a lot, because it's important to get policy correct and practice in line with policy. So I invite more dialogue about this. Once a purchase order is created by the department head who's seeking approval to spend more than $2,500, Barbara reviews it. She's checking to make sure that it's operating, I like that expression, within the 4 corners of the budget, that we have cash flow to pay for it. And only if that the person if it's more than $4,000, has gotten 3 quotes. She sends a lot of these things back to department heads. You know, she's tough. I see those emails a lot. I'm like, oh, somebody else got smacked down. Once Barbara approves it, that's not the end all either. There's a layer on top of Barbara's approval, and that's me. So I get a purchase order that a department head has signed, that Barbara has signed, and my process is to quickly look at the budget, and I'm looking to make sure we're putting the numbers in the right bucket, and I'm checking the details I see attached to the purchase order, and then I sign it. I do it once a week, and the purchase order process, start to finish, best case scenario, 2 weeks, 12 days, something like that. So if I'm hearing correctly, we're thinking about a 4th layer with a body that only meets once every 30 days. Let's take that into consideration before we jump into that, because that will have consequences, like Jim just said. But I wanted to make sure that no one listening to this or in the audience or on council didn't realize that we weren't watching what was going on. I think we actually, in fact, had things played out a little differently the last few months, I probably would have been figuring out a way to communicate with Barbara and educate council to try and get these numbers to go up, because we're creating too much we're running too much in the wet sand just to do simple transactions. And I think we can have a low bid limit equal to that of the state and the rest of municipalities. I think that makes sense. And the other thing about the state bidding limit is it goes up every year or so. I forget which department of the state publishes that information, but it goes up a little bit. We've been stuck at $10,000 since I don't know when. Those are my thoughts. I appreciate the dialogue. I want to get this right, and I want everyone who sits in those chairs to feel comfortable that you have the trust and confidence of the staff and that we do of you, and that you know where the money's going, that you know what's in the budget, and you're confident that we're cross-checking and we have layers of internal controls over how things are being spent. So we don't end up in another situation like the one you described.
So in light of that, it sounds like that fourth layer, would you agree that the fourth layer is currently in our policy, how it's written today?
You could argue that, but in practice, it's not. So there's policy and then there's practice. You're supposed to come to a full stop at every stop sign, right? How many people don't do that, Jim? So if we need to get practice right, let's get a dialogue going about what that should look like so that there's no surprises.
Oh, speaking, just from remembering, working on this policy, I'm definitely uncomfortable with the idea of having that much of a gap between our current policy and practice. So I would like to see us discuss this as a finance committee to see how we can bring those two things together. Whether we move practice to policy or policy to practice is something I think we would discuss and figure out. But as it stands, I think we need a more clear rule book either way. And I'm hearing all of the administrative work that needs to be done and that is done in practice today. I'm comfortable with what's happening, but I'm just a little bit nervous about the idea of our policy and practice being separated like that. So that's something I'd be committed to, closing that gap on. Mr. Flynn.
Thank you. To your point, Chief, in cases of emergency, like wastewater, pump blows, something goes wrong. I don't know what would happen in the police department that would cause an emergency, but there's a provision in the purchasing policy, number 7, that says the purchases that are made without the following procedure outlined shall be forwarded to the borough manager with a cover letter stating the reasons why the established procedure was not followed. Like, for example, the generator blows at the wastewater plant. They need to go get something on Sunday, and that's where that comes in play. It's mainly for emergencies. The policy that's in place has been in place since 2019, and there's a lot of rules that people follow and people skirt by, but I think it's important that it's a policy approved by council, and the borough manager has to enforce it as it stands right now until it comes before the public again to change the policy. And
Yeah.
whatever that is, it's the finance committee taking it on and trying to adjust it to levels. And that would be good interaction between your department and the other department heads. That way we could see where we could tweak it a little bit. That's all.
Yeah. And if I wasn't clear enough, my understanding of that policy, not that we're disregarding the policy, I can only speak for myself. I understood the policy to be over $10,000, anything outside of the budget that's going, obviously that would need council approval. That's what I thought that policy has always meant. So it's not that, if I misspoke, not that we're not following it. I understood it to mean what I just said.
Yeah, the budget is at my notes. How long it took me to write that thing, and I was too nervous reading it. The budget is a placeholder of agreed upon purchases. And as times go on throughout the year, the requests for those placeholders can happen at any time. Whether you need a copy machine, you need a police car, we were buying guns a couple of years ago. We were going to replace all the guns. That comes up during the year when it's available. And it's already been approved by council that, we're going to do that. It's better than trying to ask for something that's not a placeholder, because you've already been heard by council say, we're going to buy that. So, but anything above $10,000, that's earmarked in the budget, the way it reads, we have to go to Mr. Metric and come to the Borough Council or Barbara Leone until we change it.
All right. I respect your time. Thank you.
Thanks. And yeah, just to reiterate, I'm happy to hear, Ms. Young, that you're sending stuff back. I think that's a good sign that we're being stringent like we need to be. And I'm speaking for myself, I don't want to make it hard for anyone here to do their job effectively. And I think, yeah, we have another public comment. You can come on up.
Ann Carroll, 506 South Franklin Street. And a few years ago, we had a financial advisory committee, and one of the cornerstones of what we came at the end to was a real need for transparency. And based on a few things that have happened in this borough over the past 5 years or so, that need for transparency is key. I'm not sure $10,000 is the right number, but what I am sure of is that there seems to be a need for 3 prongs here, which is a good budget that anticipates the needs of the borough, and those are the 4 cornerstones. Then a check that the money is available, which is what Mr. Metric is talking about with the delay and the lag. But that's one of the reasons that we lend ourselves money out of, or in the past, we borrowed it from banks, tax anticipation. But the third level is indeed whatever that number is that you decide is appropriate for 2023 and going forward, and maybe bring it a little closer to what the state expectation is. But the third level is the bidding process. And some of this mess that happened over the last 5 years, 2 instances of which I am aware, occurred because large amounts of money were spent. And some of it was in the budget, at least one of them was in the budget, but it was never bid appropriately. And therefore, friends get things. And it can't be that a preferred provider is chosen because of reasons that are not transparent. So that's the importance of those 3 prongs. You got to have in mind that you need it. You got to have the money at the present moment that you need it. And if it's a big ticket item, name the number, then you have to do responsible, transparent bidding. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm personally fully committed to that. And I appreciate that comment.
I do have one comment. Mr.
Sure.
Metric, that $10,000 number, that's set aside by the state. Is that correct? Or is that set aside by Westchester Borough in our policy?
It's the Westchester number. The state number is like, at this point, $23,000, I think. For public bid. Yeah, we're more stringent, significantly more.
Okay. Maybe that's a number that needs to be changed.
Well, remember, we're dealing with $30 million and the state's dealing with billions of dollars. So
That's a number that even municipalities a lot smaller than Westchester have to use. That's the minimum.
The number doesn't, I mean, the number doesn't matter to me as long as, if it's a large purchase, I don't think somebody should be able just to go out and purchase, a $10,000 lawnmower without asking for it. So just doesn't make sense to let somebody do that.
Can you be clear about, without asking who? Council or the finance department or?
Well, if the lawnmower's in the budget, council's already said, you know what, we're going to buy a lawnmower this year, right? And Mr. Edwards and Mr. Anderson comes February 1st and says, I need $10,000 for a lawnmower. Well, we really don't have any money in February. We're going to have to tell them, make sure you get competitive bids. And as soon as we have enough money in the treasury, we'll let you know. And then you can present it to council and you can go out and buy it. You get a PO and go out and buy it. Yeah, council is there's checks and balances. The department heads check the employees. The borough manager and the finance director check the directors, and the borough council checks the borough manager and the finance director. Because I think you were here for the 800,000, the mistake at 800,000, and it wasn't very pretty here. It was a little hot under the collar quite a bit, and we don't ever want that to happen again. So.
Okay, any other questions or comments on, where are we, 3D? Okay, great. I appreciate that discussion. I think we're set then to move on to item 3E, which is our volunteer firefighter and EMS earned income and real estate tax credits.
Now it's my turn. Yeah, right. Good evening, Steve Pelna, Fire Chief. I'm also accompanied by EMS Chief Chaz Brogan from Good Fellowship. Mr. Flynn, Mr. McGinnis, I don't get to see every month like I do Mr. Allen, so thank you for having us tonight. But what I want to go over is two requests, two different ordinances / resolutions. One is a volunteer tax credit. The other is a cost recovery ordinance. A little bit of background. I might use the term volunteer firefighter, but I'm not slighting EMS as well. It's just out of habit. But as I go through the presentation, so Chaz can throw something at me if I do that. But the fire department, as you know, is 100% volunteer. Good Fellowship is combination, both paid and volunteer. So we are in a constant, I should say, battle to recruit and retain volunteers. The state has seen it as an issue across the state, the decline in volunteers. So they've been proactive. They've passed Act 172 in 2016 for this tax incentive. I view a volunteer, or at least holding on to a volunteer, as multiple spokes in the wheel. Every volunteer has a different reason for volunteering, and there's different reasons why we can maintain them. For instance, myself, where this would apply, I own a home. I reside in a municipality where I would benefit from a tax credit with that. Whereas a volunteer per se that's out of Westchester University, that's 19, 20 years old, they don't own a home, so there might be something different. So we as a department, as an organization, we have to look for other ways. We do stipend programs, there's different training programs, there's quite a few things. So there's not one silver bullet that holds onto a volunteer. So Chaz and myself, along with Goshen Fire Company, we've been working with the supervisors at West Goshen Township. We started a coalition a little bit over a year ago. Self-admittedly, emergency services, we don't sometimes do a great job with communication with our elected officials. So this has been a platform where we meet on a monthly basis. We look for efficiencies, things that'll help us and also help the municipalities, whether it's cost effectiveness or for in this example, the tax incentive programs with that. So I reference this Act 172. This was passed in 2016 by the state. But this allows municipalities to enact either an employee earned income tax or a real estate tax break for our volunteers. So in 2016, this was set at 20%. They quickly found out that 20% wasn't significant. You look at some of the mean, at least real estate tax is about $400. So you're looking at $80. It wasn't really enough to swing the needle for most. So in 2019, the state came back and upped that to 100%, allowing the municipalities to allow up to 100% on the income tax. So here's some main points on the EIT anyway. There needs to be a flat set amount that would be set by council. With that, again, this is on the earned income tax side of it. If the volunteer's tax is less than that amount, they don't get up to that. They only get what their actual tax is. And then finally, only residents of the municipality would be able to apply for this. So non-residents would not have that. On the real estate tax side, again,
Pause you just for a second.
Yep.
The adjective you used there, flat amount, just to clarify, that means that there's a hard cap actual number,
correct.
not some percentage.
Percentage, yes.
Because in
Yeah.
my mind, I'm picturing a volunteer fire department of millionaires who are going to come.
Right,
for you.
right. So for an example, West Goshen passed $500. So they capped it at $500. That's the number they came up with.
A quick question about
Sure.
the only residents of the municipality who are active. What documentation would you provide?
Great
the-
question.
The municipality or the state government?
Sure. So again, we went through, West Goshen was our first. We cover 6 municipalities. Go Fellowship covers 10 at this point. So what we do, at least where the ordinance is set up, at the end of the calendar year, we use whether it's hours of service, fundraising, participation. So we have a whole matrix that we would go through that you would approve, hopefully via resolution. So if we need to change that, we can change that a little easier. But what happens is the local supervisor. So for us, we have 3 individual fire companies. The president or the captain will sign off that individual has met the criteria. So they met the hours, the participation hours. And then it comes to me for a second set of eyes to ensure that is passed. Then from there, I notarize the list that those folks do indeed with that, along with a deliverable. So it would be, here's the calls that, John Smith made or what have you with that. And then that would be notarized and delivered to you early in the year. The way we have it set up with West Goshen is by January 15th. So within the first 2 weeks of the year. So then that applies to that then upcoming tax or the real estate tax. As far as on the earned income tax, that goes through the end of the year. Keystone provides a documentation process, same thing, where that's co-signed by both I'll call it the local manager, and then ultimately the fire chief or EMS chief, that person did indeed meet the criteria set out by the resolution.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question.
Sure.
The flat tax and the money. Normally, when you earn money outside of your job, you get a 1099,
Correct.
okay? And then you have to pay tax on that separately yourself. How do you give a tax credit? Is there a tax credit form
Yeah.
that you actually have from the federal government or the state government?
So we get it from the local, so Keystone,
Okay.
we would get it from that. So the local municipality through that form process. There's a whole process
Well,
for that.
The only problem, the only issue that I see with it is reporting. Because you said you'll have it done by January 15th, the information into the borough, correct?
That's on the real estate tax.
Real estate tax, right?
Right.
So they're still looking for a credit on their state taxes, right? Or,
Right. So that would be at the end of the year, more in the December-ish timeframe
okay,
for that.
okay.
So the EIT, moving on to the real estate side, again, municipality permitted to establish up to 100% of the real estate tax in that municipality. The way we had it set in West Goshen, which we're looking to change already. This is why they went with the resolution anyway. That's what they chose to do. So for this year, again, I sent them the notarized list in January. Individuals will get their tax bill as normal this coming year. May, June. Yep. So they'll get it, they'll pay it, and then the municipality, in this case, West Goshen, will then provide a rebate. So that's where the thought process was on their finance department, to have the volunteer pay it and then get a rebate. But now, after they went through the process, they want to not go through the entire, there's just gonna, the individual won't get a bill. So they found that to be easier. So that'll be changed in their resolution. Again, this is how it stands now. Volunteer pays it, they get a rebate. However, that would be best in your best interest. But just know that they already found that it works better for them to just not send a bill to the individual. I just put a couple up there. There's quite a few in the county right now as far as other municipalities with that. For budgeting purposes, just to look at the number of volunteers, we have 2 from Good Fellowship and 34 from the Westchester Fire Department. To give you an idea, with West Goshen, we had 56 that we budgeted for. It ended up being 32 that actually went through the process because of the criteria we put on. The whole purpose of this is to encourage people to come around. So there were, 20 people that didn't meet the criteria, good and bad. The good part of it, at least what I've seen already, I've seen people come around that we haven't seen in a while because there's an incentive now. That's truly what this is all about. Not to mention, just the overall thank you to our volunteers. Clearly nobody's retiring off of $500, but it's a nice thank you to our volunteers for all that they do throughout the year. So that's, again, the volunteer fire and EMS tax credit. And then I just wanted to quickly go over the cost recovery ordinance as well, with possibly a resolution with that. So this is a no cost to the borough. The true cost would be the writing or the establishment of the document itself. We already have templates. We have it in place for West Goshen. Ms. Kristen Camp wrote the one for West Goshen. So that should be an easy pass on to the borough. But what this is for is to give us a little more teeth in recovery of our costs. And that's not every incident we go to we're charging for. These are large incidents where we have a cost. So I can tell you from experience, a majority of our, we'll call them working fires, where it's a building fire, we incur quite a loss, whether it's broken tools, damage to our equipment. Our job is inherently dangerous. We're taking things around fire. Things are falling. So inherently, I always, I'm waiting for the request from the local stations after we have a major incident of our consumables that we use to recover those costs. So this is in a situation where there's already an insurance claim. There's already an insurance claim with it. And these are small requests that we would work through the individual insurance companies to recover that. No cost to the borough. What I would like to sign a contract with is a company called PA Recovery Services. I sit on the Eastern Fire Chiefs, which is all the mainline fire companies up through us. And all of the other participating companies in the Eastern Fire Chiefs use the PA Fire Recovery, along with a lot of other fire departments throughout the state. And this is a third-party service where they're going to take a percentage off the final recovery of funds. So no cost up front. We just provide them with our data that we get from our call reports, and they're able to mine the data out of it to turn that into an invoice and bill for our consumables. So, at the end of the day, we sign a contract that we're part of it, that they're able to take a percentage off the invoice. I send them on a monthly basis our call report information. They decide what can and can't be compensable, and we magically get get checks. They work on the recovery portion of it, so it's no extra administrative side to the borough as far as the actual obtaining the money after that. So again, two full requests: the volunteer fire and tax credit on EIT and real estate, and then also the cost reimbursement, cost recovery.
Wow, thank you. That was a lot of.
Sorry, there was a lot. I
That
threw up on you a lot.
Mr. Flynn, do you have a question?
What happens if the volunteer is a renter?
If they're a renter,
They don't qualify.
they don't qualify. You have to own.
Thank you.
And you have to own, and it has to be your primary residence. So, we do have a lot of that. We do have individuals that may live outside of the borough, but they have rental properties in the borough. They would not be able, it has to be their primary residence. So that's where that checks and balances goes through that we know where they live. So.
Any questions?
That was just my question. It's going to be either or, either the income tax or the property tax, right?
Both. No, it's both.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it would be capped though at,
So that,
example, like $500, what West Goshen does, but it wouldn't be capped for 500 and they earn income tax and 500 for the property tax for a total of 1,000. It would just be 500 total.
So what they did was, so they capped the EIT at 500, just a round number. They also capped the real estate at 500, just because the mean real estate tax in West Goshen is around $400.
So it would be $1,000 per person then.
Yeah, if they have to work in the borough and they have to live in the borough. So that number is worst case scenario that I gave you. Not everybody out of that 36, lives and works in the borough. So they would have to do both
Okay.
to get
Thank you.
get
Thank
everything.
you for the clarification.
Yep.
I just wanted to reiterate again, it's a great plan, seems to me. For all of this, there's no cost to the borough at all. Is that,
What's that?
am I wrong? Did I misunderstand that?
There would be a cost, but excuse me, but it would be spread across, since we operate a regional fire department, it would be spread across our membership. So if the borough is, let's say the borough is a 40% piece of the Westchester Fire Department, when we go through this next contract, let's just use that number, then essentially 40% of this real estate and EIT rebate would be baked into the borough's contribution to fire services.
Is this like, so in your scenario of the millionaire firefighter, if everyone was all 36 and it's 500 on both sides, that would be a maximum expense of like $36,000
Yeah.
for the borough?
Right.
Is that something that other municipalities have looked at, like setting aside a maximum number
No, not
in that
ma-
regard,
we-
or?
No. Again, at least on the West Goshen side, ultimately, if we bring more volunteers in, that's the longer we're strategically planning for the future, the longer we're able to maintain a volunteer base before we would have to go to a paid department. So that's the whole driver of it. And one of my main drivers, of my job is to maintain the volunteer. We want to maintain the volunteer in perpetuity, if we can. So every last thing we can do to recruit and retain our volunteers, so we don't have to take that $500 number and turn it into $500,000 or $5 million, is astronomical if we had to go to a fully paid staff.
That makes sense. All right, thank you.
You gotta think about it.
All right.
It was a lot. I gotta read
Understood.
to the thing, and Chaz didn't say a word, which scares me. Because
Say hi.
he's used to asking for money, so, but it's a great ask. More than the county would ever do for you. The local places would help you out a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, and just on that, you reminded me. The county is actually going through the efforts now. The commissioners are in support of it, so they're looking to do a county tax rebate or refund for us as well. So And then the next is the big guy, the school district. So, but there's already early talk about that, but you know, baby steps here, municipality, we'd love your support and,
He's
for all
still gonna
volunteers.
pass, and he's
Yeah,
ready.
right.
So good luck on that.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And Mr. McGinnis, how do you feel about this? Okay.
No. Right. I think that the devil is going to be in the details.
Is this something we'd want to keep in committee, or is this something we'd want to discuss with full council?
I would keep it in committee and then come back for a refresher.
Sure. Yeah, whenever, just let me know.
I'm happy to do that.
Yeah. Next, what I would do next time, because it's so much you gave us,
Yep.
break it down.
Okay. Yeah, no problem.
Earned income tax or real estate first.
Yeah.
Let's say, okay, we're going to work on that, then we'll go to the earned income tax, and then with the recovery cost opportunities, that burnt me out.
Yeah.
So-
Sorry. Yeah,
It's okay.
you know, every,
Did better than I did.
every municipality is different. As you know, Chaz and I just presented at Westtown and they wanted all of this in 5 minutes. So I did, and they liked it. So every municipality is going to take a different approach.
Great. Well, thank you so much for all the information. I do appreciate
Thank you,
it.
guys.
Is there any
Thank you.
public comment on that before we scoot along here? All right, excellent. We are good to then move on to our action items. Action item 4A is to approve the purchase of 2 police vehicles and a dump truck.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
I would like to bifurcate this action item. I would like to take the 2 police cars, move them to the side, and then let the dump truck go to the other side. And there's a main reason for this. With your permission.
I mean, I'm okay to, what do you want to, this is a fun agenda. We can call it A1 and A2. A1 could be the dump truck. You want to start there?
Well, the dump truck's the easiest one.
We want to start with
Yeah,
the
we'll
easiest
start with
one?
the dump truck.
All right,
If
dump truck.
If I read Mr. Leonti, if I read the request from the budget and the request from the ARP money, Mr. Metric said that we're going to spend the balance of the money on different items to buy certain things. The dump truck is already in the ARP money, and
And it was in the 2023 budget as well.
right, and Mr. Edwards' job to request us to buy the dump truck out of the ARP money. And we have all the documentation here, the
Correct.
cost, what it is and everything else. He just has to request it, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Edwards? You got to ask for your dump truck.
Don Edwards, Public Works. May I please have this dump truck?
You got it, as far as I'm concerned. What do you guys think? Yeah. Yeah, we have all the.
I have no
documentation.
issues with that.
We know what it costs. The money is secured in the ARP money.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Moving to the 2 police cars.
Are we good to call that 3-0?
Yeah,
Just
3-0.
verbally. So item, what are we calling this? 4A2.
Yeah. The 2 police cars. Last night, there was a lot of verbiage about the 2 police cars and using enterprise leasing and why we did certain things and why we didn't do certain things. I called the dealerships today. I called Tri-State and I called Tri-State. I talked to Ed Horner over at Tri-State. And I contacted Enterprise Leasing. And what I found out is the exact price for the police car sitting on the lot at Tri-State is exactly what Enterprise Leasing would charge us for that police car, with addition to the upfitting. To become a police car, you have to look different than all the other cars. So the upfitting is sometimes $10,000 or $15,000 to do the upfitting, if I'm correct, Mr. Metric. $15,000 or $16,000, and that's an aftermarket. Okay, so the truck that's sitting at Tri-State and the truck that's sitting in New Holland is actually the same price as CoStar's and same price as Enterprise Leasing. We spoke to Enterprise Leasing this afternoon, and Enterprise Leasing is willing to take on both of these items, write the check to the two dealerships, send the two police cars out for retrofitting. The borough doesn't have to spend any money out of the general fund or ARP money. And the only additional cost to getting these two vehicles is the upfitting. And I got an email from Enterprise tonight, which one of the questions that Mr. Metric asked was, they said that they can capitalize or include the upfit in the lease. If you don't want to include it in the lease, they require 50% down, which is normal. We did that for the other 4 police cars because it's an aftermarket item. So basically what I'm telling you is that Enterprise has agreed to absorb these 2 vehicles into the leasing program. We need to send Enterprise the 2 bills of lading tomorrow, and they will cut the checks to both of the dealerships. It drops into our Enterprise leasing program, and we move forward as we always have. Mr. Metric had a couple questions that he's still uncertain about. And the fellow by the name, our agent, his name is Seth Frankel. And the next week or 2, we're going to set a meeting up with Mr. Metric, myself, Barb, and any other person that wants to attend from Borough Council and get the questions answered. They have to do with depreciation, and they have to do with administrative costs, basically. But to move forward, to eliminate all the anxiety over going through all the questions tonight, Enterprise was able to do everything for us without us doing anything. And I talked to Mr. Metric about it, and he agreed it was a good move at this given time. And as we move forward into this year, we'll get his questions answered. And in May, work session, Enterprise Leasing is going to come and give a State of the Union to the borough on the 15 cars that we've purchased and the 2 new police cars, which are going to be basically drop shipped, in a week or so, as soon as the upfitting takes place out in Lancaster. So the only thing Mr. Metric has to decide when he talks to Mr. Seth Frankel is whether we want to include the upfitting into the lease, or we have to pay it one way or the other, or we want to pay 50% and move forward the way we have in the past. So that's the long and short of it. We don't have to deal with it tonight. Mr. Metric has something he agreed he wants to expound upon, and the 2 police cars go right into the Enterprise leasing program. Thank you, Mr. Metric.
And so it sounds like, Mr. Metric, you still have questions about, can we talk about what those questions are?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate, Bernie, the dialogue we had today about this. So thank you for taking that time and for the extra legwork you did today. Just to be clear, I would like to see Enterprise produce one of these lease schedules for us before we agree to anything, because this is the detail sheet. This is the thing I have to sign when the car shows up that I have 10 days to sign. There was an important question posted in some emails, or maybe it was mentioned last night. And ultimately the decision is mine. Why did I decide that purchasing was a better option going into 2023 than leasing? So I want to just, if I can have like maybe 4 or 5 minutes of everyone's time, I want to go over that. Bring up my slide presentation. I'm going to keep this really short.
Metrics walking around. Tri-State and New Holland car dealerships are both CoStar agencies, as well as Enterprise Leasing is. And Enterprise goes a step further. They're a Sourcewell participant which they have to actually earn every year from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So that's why the pricing has to be exactly the same as the dealers.
We're talking about patrol vehicles, although Enterprise has the ability to service a lot of our needs, up to Ford F-450s, I believe, is their biggest car they can go to. But they're able to service our our demand for new police interceptors. We have 14 in the fleet of patrol cars that we cycle on 7-year cycles. And so every year we're looking for 2 new cars and we put the 2 old ones out to pasture. We either have them driven by detectives or command staff, or we sell them. That's the basic routine. I won't get into all of the details. One of these cars in this photo is leased and the others are not. Can you tell the difference? You can't, right? Don't guess, because if you guess, you have a 25% chance of being right, right? So it's really indistinguishable. I learned a lot of great things about how we're managing our fleet through this. All of our fleet vehicles are keyed alike, meaning any key that's hanging on the rack you can drive off with it. That helps with operations. The equipment, like we mentioned, to turn a car that comes from the factory into a car that we can use on the street costs about $16,000. So what I wanted to do last year, let me backtrack a second. The best time to put orders in for cars is around August of the year preceding the year that the car is going to be delivered. Once you put the order in, Ford manufactures, in this case, these are Fords. Ford manufactures the vehicle, it gets delivered. And we actually took delivery of our police cars in 2022, quite late in the year because of supply chain issues. It wasn't until July that we received our first police vehicle, even though we had ordered it 12 months prior. When the vehicle arrives, it arrives with a lease schedule, which tells us how much we're going to pay for this thing. We signed 5-year leases. And I wanted to make the comparison between purchasing and leasing as simple as possible with this spreadsheet. So everyone remembers how Battleship works, right? So if you look at B9, hit. That's the price that Bernie was just mentioning. What is the all-in price for the vehicle and the upfitting in 2022? It was $55,146, okay? When we leased, those are lines 1 through 4. We have an upfront capital payment for half of the upfitting. That's cell B2 of $76.15. We have the lease payment of 12 months at $1,002.42. The purchasing is a little bit easier to understand. You pay for the car with cash, and it's yours. You don't have any more equity payment. You don't have any more payments to make. You bought it. Baked into the lease payment of $1,000 are 2 important things that everyone needs to understand to evaluate leasing. And it took me a long time to figure this one out because it wasn't until the car started arriving that I saw the details in these lease schedules. There's 2 ingredients to the sausage: depreciation and the monthly lease charge. The depreciation payment portion of that $1,000 is about $800 a month. So if anyone's doing their math in the head real fast, what's 800 times 60, Nick? About 48,000. I see I put you on the spot. So by the time that the 5-year lease is up, we've paid all the depreciation for the vehicle, basically bought the car. And the cell number G RBV charge at lease term, it says $157. That's the residual value after we've made all those depreciation payments. So when Enterprise goes to sell the vehicle for us, it deducts that $157 off of the sale price and credits that back into the new lease. Getting back to the lease payment of $1,000, The other 20% of that lease payment is a monthly lease charge. That is our maintenance agreement, which I'll get to in a second. And I got to be honest with you, a bunch of other things, I've read the agreement a bunch of times that I don't really understand, but some of it is indexed to the prevailing 3-year Treasury bill rate plus 350 basis points. So some of it's variable rate. I don't know what the principal is in that equation. So the monthly lease charge in this case, when the car was delivered, was $200. Okay? Everyone with me so far? So let me talk a little bit about maintenance. We decided to purchase a maintenance agreement, which costs roughly $40 to $50 a month. Whether your car needs work that month or not, you pay the $40 or $50. However, repairs to tires, repairs having to do with accidents, and repairs for our own neglect at not maintaining the vehicles, not that we do that, are all on us. Jim's shaking his head, but the truth of the matter is, and it's just part of it, it's just reality. Police are hard on cars, especially tires, brakes, those things go. So in that non-covered maintenance line item you see in line row 3 and in row 7s, there's a tire 1.5 tire replacements. There's also a fair amount of damage repair. Now, the covered maintenance is an interesting thing. It's completely covered in the lease agreement. So I assumed there would be no additional charge for the covered maintenance. The first 2 years of the vehicle, we were using real data for this number. We went into our own system. First 2 years, you really don't pay a lot of covered maintenance. The car's young. You're just fixing fluids, right? It's really year 3, 4, and 5 where covered maintenance costs really start to escalate and take a bite out of the purchasing solution. Even you're spending in some years up to $1,400 there in year 4. So long story short, all of the expenses for leasing add up for 5 years, $71,000. All of the expenses for purchasing add up to $62,000. That is going upon the basis that we're getting the same car for the same price at the beginning of the lease. And I've also put in an assumption that whether Enterprise sells it for us or we sell it ourselves on municipal bid, that we get roughly the same amount back, that we can credit either to a future lease or to a future car we purchase. So where we end up is that there is a total cost difference for this example of about $9,400 over the life of the lease over 5 years. That's why I decided to do what I did. That's what Seth and Enterprise have to be responsive to when they send us this lease schedule. They got to get that cost down for us. And frankly, if it does cost more, know that working with Enterprise is a lot easier for me and Barb. We can just call them up and the car arrives and they help manage the sale, procurement. They send it. They make it very easy. They're good partners. But council, this is my first time seeing the cost comparison broken down this way. And that's why you saw a budget that like you did. I'm still going to have this concern. I'm looking forward to getting the lease schedule from Seth, and we can talk about it next Tuesday. If it answers these concerns and council's okay with it, I think we can have a little more breathing room to have this conversation. One of the things I wish I had done differently is had this conversation I'm having with you right now last July or August. And what I am going to do, what I have learned about vehicle purchasing in general, is that we got to come and talk to you in August of the year preceding the year we're going to bring the vehicles in, because that's the best time to buy. That's when we get the best value. We know we're going to need the cars. And honestly, the reason I didn't do it is it kind of breaks one of my own internal rules about budgeting, which is don't make any budgeting decision outside of the context of all other budgeting decisions. So in August, I have no idea what the budget looks like. Budget really isn't put together until September. it makes more sense in October, and we have a really good finished product for you in November, but I don't know by August what it's going to look like. So I had a little diffidence about taking this forward and requesting money in August. That's why I put it in the budget, got the approval first, and then went out and hunted the cars. I don't want to do it that way this year. I think it's important to put in the purchase orders when the manufacturers are filling their order banks, because we get better prices. So we'll have another opportunity in August to have this conversation again. I can present a leasing option that's complete. We can compare apples to apples. We can have a leasing option. You can have a purchase option. You can even have a financing option if you want to. And we can have this conversation. It can be transparent. You guys can decide what you want to do, and we can get it taken care of that way. I think that's a good way to move forward.
And then just in terms of, because this is, on our action item agenda, what kind of action do we need to take as a committee and as council next week just to make sure that the police department is getting what they need?
I think next week, council has to decide to commit to a lease or commit to the purchase. And this is an opportunity for Seth and Enterprise to step in and make a good offer for us and see if they can close some of this gap.
So the numbers we have now are showing that it's $9,400 cheaper to purchase than it is to lease.
Would have been, this is based upon 2022. Okay, so now we're talking about 2023 vehicles. I didn't run a comparison, and we're going to get that from Enterprise before Tuesday. And so it's a tight, I know we're fitting it into a tight window. That's partly my fault, and I take responsibility for that, but let's get the information together, and you and council can make the decision.
So is this something that would make sense to us to bump to next week without a recommendation, and then we'll have more information next week to discuss?
I think I'm going to call Seth tomorrow and just make sure he understands it from my point of view too. I know you two spoke. I want to see it in writing what it's going to cost.
I just have a comment here. This action item states approve purchase of 2 police vehicles and a dump truck. So because we already passed the agenda, either we have to approve action item A or not approve. There has no motion made to split. So that needs to be clear.
Yeah, I asked Mr. Allen whether we could bifurcate the
You can't.
2 items.
You can't do that. That had to be made at the beginning of the meeting. Because we're guided under Robert's Rules of Order, so I'm sorry, but we have to either approve it or not approve action item A.
We're not approving it tonight because we have to wait for full council. So, I'd be comfortable moving 4A in its entirety to the discussion agenda for next week with no recommendation.
Okay, good.
Do we have any issues with doing that way?
I have no issues doing that, but yeah, that's what we have to do.
Sure. Any public comments or questions about that? Excellent. All right, then we will do that. Which means we're good then to move on to 4B, which is to approve the Chester County CRP grant resolution for the Gay Street Open Air Marketplace Phase 1 project.
Good evening. We're writing a grant. It's due next week for phase 1 of the infrastructure to make the Gay Street Open Air Marketplace safer and easier to pull off. The ask of the county is $750,000. Again, we're imagining this as a 2-phase project, and this is just your standard resolution to go to council, basically acknowledging that you all approve of the ask. The only other thing I would add is because Application is due Thursday, assuming no problems getting this approved by council. We all need to have a signing party on Wednesday night.
I'm more than happy to do that.
I have no questions about that.
Any public comment or concern? All right, I'm happy to recommend that one 3-0. And then 4C is to approve allocation of funding for 401 East Gay Street Municipal Roof Project, which we have discussed at length, correct, for a couple months?
Do you have the exact number, Barb, or?
It was around $631,000. Last month, we approved the bid, but we didn't ask for the allocation to use the ARPA money for that. So that's what the ask is tonight.
Yep, sounds good to me.
Approved.
All righty, item 4D is to approve additional allocation of $9,810 from the American Rescue Plan Act for 2023 General Fund Capital Project Cartograph Systems Implementation Project 2227.
This is a project being led by Nick Fink, our manager of data enterprise applications. This should sound familiar because it's been previously approved, but we have to, what we're coming back for is additional funding to add in certain modules and features to the project, because as we got into it, we realized it made, take it away. You know best.
All right, Nick Vank, Manager of Enterprise Data and Applications. So what this is we are asking Cartograph to provide 5 more user seats. So it's a named user licensing model at $500 a user. There's more interest in using the system than we had initially anticipated because wastewater is very excited about using it. So I think it's $2,500 for 5 additional users. I think it's around $1,300 or $1,400 for an additional module for our wastewater pipes. Initially, we thought that that was included in the wastewater treatment plant module. They're overlapping, but separate pieces. And then there are additional funds in there for implementation costs from Cartograph. And some of this will be offset by, I think, $1,200 to $1,300 we're receiving back on our permitting system for a module we had purchased that we're not going to use.
That makes sense. Any questions about that, concerns?
I have no questions.
Any public comments or questions? I'm very excited about this one. I always am. So thank you for what you're doing. We'll call that one 3-0.
Thank you.
And then 4E is our minutes from March. Any questions or concerns there? All right, we'll call that
No.
one 3-0. And then we're good now for what we've called item F, which is to give permission to explore moving our reserve fund into a money market fund in order to generate a higher yield.
Yes, so thank you. And I had this conversation before Mr. Metric, and I just want to confirm that we do have the ability, per the investment policy, to move those assets in the reserve fund to a higher yielding instrument. Would that be correct?
Yes, I can check on that. I do think it's correct. Yeah.
Okay. With that, I mean, I just did some brief calculations. Money markets at the beginning of the year were roughly around 4%, on a reserve fund around $8 million, which would give an annual return dividend, I should say, of about $320,000, which comes to about $26,666 a month. So from January, February, and March alone, because we didn't do anything, we lost about $80,000 in interest. For this month, the 7-day SEC yield of the Vanguard Cash Reserve Federal Money Market Fund as of April 11th, 2023 is 4.76%. That gives us another additional $31,000 that we lost in interest, for a total of $111,000 year to date in lost income. So that's why I would like to see explore these options, take some action within the next month, because that would give us a significant amount of dividend income for the rest of the year that could prevent tax increases, as well as potentially aid to capital projects.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds great to me. I know our history on finance committee, we've always kicked this idea around. And I do remember more than one occasion being told that our investment policy wouldn't allow whatever ideas were being presented at that time. So if this is something that we can do, I'm all about it and I want to do it.
So with that, the money market funds are generally the most conservative funds with a stable share price of $1 per share. They consist of repurchase agreements, certificates of deposit, cash. And so it's not like we're investing it in a fluctuating asset, such as a bond fund or an equity fund. I just think that this would probably be the most prudent thing that we can do moving forward to gain that yield.
Great, I'm all about it if we can do it.
The only question I have is, we've been beating this thing around since January 2nd. When can we expect something to be done? Mr. Metrick?
Our current assets are with Truist Bank. So
Correct.
we have to figure out if they can do that for us as our custodian. We've already reached out to RBC about potential custodian relationship for this. They certainly can do it. So we're waiting to sit down and talk to Truist. Is where we're at.
How long are you going to wait? Hopefully not a month.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully a couple days, or a week or so, so we can move this thing forward. Mr. Largus has been begging for this for 2 years, and it took Mr. McGinnis to try to push this thing forward. So I think we need to move faster than later to get the thing moving, because we're losing capital money that we could be spending on capital projects. Yes, sir.
Just told me our appointment's on the 28th with them. So.
There you go. Beautiful. Look at that.
If this is working, if it comes to fruition, that could be another $250,000 remaining for the rest of the year.
Great. I'm assuming we don't need to take any action as a committee on that if we're moving. Are there any other questions or comments on that item before we move on? Okay, great. Thanks for bringing that up. And then item G is the idea of doing an RFP for insurance. And you said general and health?
Yes, and I think this comes due to the fact a couple meetings ago that we did receive a significant rebate for insurance costs. A lot of that probably has to do with the Affordable Health Care Act, but I think it would be prudent to say, hey, why didn't we receive that cost over the last couple of years? Why has it been a one hit at that particular time? So I think shopping for additional health and welfare insurance would probably make sense.
Is this something that we more regularly bid?
Yeah, we actually are in the process of doing this right now with our health benefits. So I think we had a meeting this week within the last 5 days actually on this with a potential provider. So we're looking at this. Is this what is the action item here?
It would be it would be under G, but would we need to put out an RFP for that, for the borough?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay.
We can reach out to brokers and test the relationship and then see if it does make sense to switch and then bring that new contract to you.
Is that public though? Has that been made public that we are shopping around?
No.
Then wouldn't the RFP make sense to put an RFP out there then, in that case, to make sure it's public?
It could, yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think that would probably be the best course of action. That way it's public and we could look at getting the best price and coverage possible.
Is that something that you would see as advantageous for us to find a better rate potentially?
I think what we've learned so far is that it's a complex conversation. It's not just about finding the lowest cost provider of benefits. You have to have a conversation about what are the benefits you're providing? How does it fit in your overall compensation package? How is that benchmarked against competing employers? How is your current relationship performing? We're in a very unique health insurance pool of other municipal governments. So depending on how our group performs, we can get a rebate on our health premiums, and we have gotten pretty big rebates the last 3-4 years on that because we've had below, our group performs well compared to others. So that would, if we went out on the open market to get health benefits, we'd be changing the entire paradigm of how we do, how we purchase these products. You have to understand your group demographics. If you go out in open market, there's two things that you affect your insurance rates, age and smoker status. That's the only two things that matter for Affordable Care Act. But in our group plan, we have 2 flavors of care, single and family. So it's not as easy as just hanging a shingle and finding out who's going to come in and make you an offer. But we are exploring it. I haven't thought through what an RFP would look like. It's usually you're buying your health, and there's the big 4, right? That's Blue Cross, United, Cigna, and Aetna, right? Buca. That most people in the country are covered by one of those 4. Around here, Blue Cross is pretty big, but the employees are covered by United Healthcare, actually, through PIMIC. So I would like to, I wish John were here to help me answer this question a little bit better. It's his subject matter expertise. But it's not like going out and finding somebody to pave the roads in the same way. But I understand what you're saying about soliciting proposals, which is what we were doing through our existing broker relationship. And the broker then goes out and markets the group to the healthcare providers. And they have put together a proposal for us. It's proprietary to them, but I'm glad to talk about it offline with anybody.
Is that something you'd be comfortable giving administration a month to do some research on, and we could come back and discuss it again next month? Just keep the ball rolling?
I think that would make sense, but I would rather see something done sooner rather than later and open it up to the public market. But if we want to give, put this on the agenda for next month and discuss that further, I think that would make sense.
Yeah,
I could ask John to attend and kind of color the picture better than I just did.
I think that would be a good gesture.
And Mr. Metrick's point, it's not like you going out and buying Blue Cross or Blue Shield. We're in a very large consortium of other municipalities which piggyback off one another. So if we go out independently to try to do it, I'm sure the prices are going to be a lot higher than as a buying group. As a buying group, you have a stronger push to get lower prices and better service, I think.
okay, great. That sounds good to me. Excellent. Okay, great. Well, thanks for the information. I'm looking forward to even more of it next month. Any public comments or questions about what we're calling item G? Okay, great. One more. Item H is about tree planting. Yeah, come on now.
I'd like to very briefly describe the work that we want to do. Jeff, you could call up either one. Which one you got? Okay. So Jeff, you could scroll down, just scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. Okay, keep going. Okay, I think that's, so we have approximately 100 locations. And it may start by saying this is our arborist report. And he has selected about 100 locations for new trees. So we've done our due diligence as far as where they need to go. And if Jeff, you could call up the second one. And second page. Okay, so all of this is under contract now. And these are the prices. I think you'll see prices, you know, that range from $300, $400 for the most part. And so the total cost of what we like to do, 100 times, say 400, about $40,000 is what we're requesting.
Great, thank you. Any questions or concerns about that?
No.
Okay, great. Appreciate that. Any public comment? All right, we can bump that ahead to next week as a 3-0 recommendation then. Is there any other business tonight? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and adjourn at 8:29. Thank you.